Hello, everyone. Let's talk about authentic listening. This will be a presentation in three parts. For the purposes of this event, I'll be allotting the first 30 minutes or so for a brief explanation of what my talk is about, as well as an even shorter overview of who I am and how come I'm doing this. Another 15 minutes will be a sample of the materials that I have created. Finally, I'll take a good old Q&A and interact with you all live, direct, and in living color. Pun totally intended. Well, for starters, I am 53 years old, and in the past 53 years walking this earth, 35 of those years have been spent teaching. Differently from what most people think, I did not get my start at IPUV. A lot of people know me from that school where I was for, gosh, I think 11 years of my life in Brazil, where I taught. I actually got my start at another school. My next door neighbor used to work at this little place called Idiomas. It was a smaller school, and they didn't only have English, they had all sorts of other languages. And she was an English teacher there, and she needed a substitute teacher. This was 1990. I was fresh out of high school. I had just graduated from Oak Ridge High School. It was 1990. Oak Ridge High School is in California. Go Trojans. And I went into that classroom not knowing what I was doing, but I fell in love with that process. Absolutely, from beginning to end, I just fell in love with it. And I knew that I wanted to be a teacher right off the bat. That's my start, 1990. Fast forward to 1991, then I started going to UFIS to get my degree to become an official English teacher, because that's what you did back in the day. And I loved every aspect of the university degree for English teachers at UFIS. I studied everything that I absolutely loved because it had everything to do with my passion for English, for literature, and communication to a certain extent. Let's fast forward a little bit longer. So I took time off after I graduated from UFIS and I went to New Zealand. I was in New Zealand 1995, 1996. Later on, I went to Australia where I studied for a master's degree in education and English literacy. But all the while that I was doing the teaching, that I was traveling, I was always sharing my knowledge with the rest of the world. Because I studied abroad, I was often a speaker for exchange students that wanted to go abroad. I did this in New Zealand for AFS. I also did this in the United States. I gave talks at my old high school. And of course, I spent 11 years in Brazil teaching. At the University of Western Sydney, I was a visiting professor, and I taught techniques and approaches in EFL and ESL as well. I have extensive experience in front of a classroom. And let us just say, it doesn't get any better than this. I absolutely love what I do. This entire time, I've been living my Janet Jackson fantasy in front of people, except that she dances and I teach. So let's talk about where I am right now. I have my notes right here because I don't want to miss a thing. So that's why I'm doing this. So it is the beginning of the 2000s, and here I am in Norway. I got my proficiency diploma in Norwegian. Norwegian is not a difficult language in terms of grammar and structure. It's pretty easy to learn in that department. The pronunciation is a little bit difficult. but I've been here for almost a quarter of a century, so I managed to communicate pretty well in the language. I obtained my proficiency diploma, but all the while I was teaching Portuguese, Spanish, and English at language schools, junior high schools. I've been doing this almost as I just go on automatic pilot because I am so used to it. It's just such a huge part of me. So, just to give you a frame of reference for what I'm talking about when I say junior high schools and high schools, the students here, by the time they reach junior high, high school, they're already fluent in English. They may not have all the academic underpinnings of English perfection, let's put it that way, but they can speak English. So, what I do teach them, I teach them academic writing, I teach them American studies, literature of English speaking countries, British studies, the history, the social studies of English speaking countries. So, it's pretty much about the English speaking world. So, why did I invite you all here to talk about authentic listening? First of all, let us unpack this term, authentic, right? What is that? People are always playing fast and loose with the term authentic. People want to live their authentic lives. They want to live as their authentic self. They want to eat authentic Italian food. They want an authentic Swedish costume for Halloween. Authentic is a big deal right now. But what do I mean when I use it here for the purposes of this talk and for listening activities? An authentic listening experience has something to do with content that has never been heard before and it hasn't been rehearsed. In other words, it is original on many levels. It's very hard to be original now in 2025 when everything has been invented. People have done everything. So now we're pretty much rehashing different ideas and we're improving ideas that someone else had. I'm not saying that I'm the first one to do this, what I'm doing with my project, but what I am saying is that I've been working with it effectively in classes to give my students authentic listening experiences. So I am going to start with this. Hope you can see it. I am pretty sure that the older teachers in the room have used one of those. Am I right? You have to have used one of those. I have another one here. So you had to go into the classroom with one of those, right? And it had to be at the correct point. You did not want to just go in and do it in the classroom. You had to fast forward or rewind to the correct point so you wouldn't miss the spot. It was not fantastic, but we all used those back in the day. And let's talk about the listening activities back when we started. Most of the listening activities they were either with a tape script. The kids and young adults, everybody who was taking an English course or taking English would look at the text and listen at the same time. I'm not, by no means, there's no love lost between me and those tape scripts and all of those listening activities where you had the text in front of you. Is that a real listening activity? It all depends on on the group that you have. But I do believe that an authentic listening activity has something to do with listening to spontaneous conversation, or in the case of the materials that I use, I have, okay, so there are basically two things: the interviews for educational purposes and statements. So with the interviews, there are two people talking the whole time, and I'm going to say, I'm always one of those speakers. With the statements, people that I invite to give the statements or people that I book, I'm going to talk about it in a bit so you will understand what I mean by book. They are authentic speakers. They didn't rehearse what they're going to say. Well, to an extent they might rehearse, but it is not a phony reenactment of something. Have you ever had the experience that you play an audio file and the students start laughing? They start laughing at the accent or at the voices. I had this experience many times when I was teaching in Brazil. The students would start laughing at the voice actors because all of those audio files, they're done by either native speakers or people who have fluent English, but they're all reenactments of something that was rehearsed. But the statements, they're a more natural approach to an authentic listening experience. I book those statements usually from actors, actresses, models, pageant queens, and famous people. The interviews for educational purposes, they are a long life project for me. I started very young in life, very young in life. When I was a little girl, I was already walking around with a tape recorder like that politician. Those of you who are my age or older, you will know Cacique Juruna. He was a politician. He walked around with a tape recorder and he would interview people. He would record everything to have evidence. Anywho, so this project, Interviews for Educational Purposes, I have my notes here. The project includes interviews and statements from celebrities, educators, authors, sports people, comedians, and people from all walks of life with one thing in common: they all speak English. Why are my interviews on YouTube? People might wonder, yeah, why YouTube, Pollyanna? My interviews are on YouTube for a reason. Back during the pandemic, I started teaching from home, just like most of us at the time. And what I noticed is that students did not want to be on video. They didn't want to speak, they didn't want to be on video. And it was basically me talking to lots of black screens, and no one wanted to participate. So what I did was, okay, let's have live premieres on YouTube. So I set up live premieres, and they would be, I'll try to show you one later today if it works. But the premieres, there is a countdown at the beginning, there is intro music, and then I'll be on video. And they didn't have to talk. They would just listen, and they would be able to communicate with me through the chat. That was just an arrangement that made people comfortable, and it worked for that time. It really worked. We We would, of course, still have the video conferences where people had to talk sometimes, but they looked forward to having the YouTube sessions where they would just type in chat. So the YouTube channel, I've been keeping this YouTube channel for about 20 years. I started it to just send videos of my daughter to my family and friends in Brazil. So I just gathered all of my interviews here. At the moment, I have close to 50 of them. Not all of them are on here, but I have close to 50 of them. So this here, for instance, this is an interview with April Jane. April Jane was in MILF Manor. You know what the acronym MILF means, right? Everyone knows. MILF Manor was a show on TV where older women dated younger men. April Jane, she was already a TV personality when she went into MILF Manor. She was in a show Married with Children. She was also in Moonlighting with Bruce Willis, and she did a variety of other shows on TV in the 80s and 90s. She is a household name. And then she did MILF Manor. So I invited her, and she graciously accepted my invitation. Let's talk about what these interviews entail and how they connect to my classes. That's very important too. You can't just show something for the sake of showing it. What I did was I paired all of the interviews with the topics being approached in the book that I'm teaching. The book is called Citizens. And one of the topics in there, among other English-speaking world oriented topics, is the American dream. The American dream. So what I did is I asked every American person that I interviewed, I asked them to define the American dream. I asked them to talk about what it meant to them and what they think it meant for the world. I wanted my students to hear not only about the American dream from the definition that is, there's always a definition for everything. You open a textbook, there is a beautiful textbook definition, right? But I wanted them to hear from real people. So I asked all of my American interviewees to talk about the American dream. Here we have Kalia McNeil. Kalia was my guest speaker during Black History Month a couple of years ago. During Black History Month, there's also a whole chapter in the Citizens book about Black Americans. So instead of just reading a text about a Black American, I had them listen to an interview with a Black American. So Kalia McNeil talked about the United States racism representation in showbiz, and what I feel makes my students interested in listening to what these people have to say when I invite them into my classroom is that they are celebrities. When they are celebrities, everyone wants to hear what they have to say. They're like, oh, wow, who is this? Oh, so they were on Criminal Minds. She was on Criminal Minds. She was also in a show called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And she has her own Amazon Prime special. And she's very funny. She's a comedian. So the kids really wanted to listen to what she had to say. With American studies, it was easier to find people from the United States to grant me interviews. I had a lot of contacts from the time I lived in the United States, so these contacts are people that I already knew from living in the United States. And then, of course, I had contacts from Australia. When we study Australia and New Zealand, I usually show an interview with Australian people talking with an authentic Australian accent. I'm going to say something that might be, I don't mean to diss voice actors or anything, but very often I notice that it, at least in my experience, okay, with the audio files from this textbook, Citizens, they have, I think it's some of the voice actors are Norwegian trying to fake an Australian accent. And it's not the same as having a real thing, is it? So after watching people be interviewed, I felt like it would be more than appropriate to have my students try to ask questions. So it becomes a really authentic listening experience. They have to formulate questions and they have to also understand what's being said. But I gave them a hands on experience when I invited some of my interviewees to be in a classroom, live and direct. This was probably one of the most exciting parts for some of the kids. And I'm saying kids here, but my students are 17, 18, 19. The school system in Norway is different. So what happens is they will start high school. High school here is 11th, 12th, and 13th, sometimes the 14th year, depending on the course of studies that they choose. So these kids, older kids anyway, some of them really want to speak out. They want to speak up. They want to show off their English skills. So they want to ask questions. They want to participate. So when I had speakers live and direct with them, I had people that were willing to ask questions, were willing to participate. And it was always a lot of fun. It really was. And it gave them that authentic feel of, I am speaking English to somebody that wouldn't understand me otherwise. And I feel like whenever we are in the classroom, for example, for me here, they know I speak Norwegian. They know that any moment, if they want to break character, they can start speaking Norwegian and I'll be able to talk to them. I'll be able to understand them. So when I talk to a person from another country who doesn't speak Norwegian, that brings authenticity to the table. Well, I want to talk about the statements because the interviews, I I approach people. I either know them from before because from my time living in the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. But in the case of celebrities, you have to just be bold and ask them. You can send them a message on Instagram or Facebook or whatever platform they're available to you depending on their level of celebrity. And for instance, I had somebody from America's Next Top Model give a statement. I booked the statement on a place called Cameo. Cameo is a platform where you can book a celebrity and you give them some guidelines. You don't give them a script, so it's still unscripted, it's still authentic and spontaneous to an extent. You can book the celebrity to give a statement. So this here is Rachel Dolezal. She was the subject of a documentary that I showed my students In this documentary, she talks about her life as a white woman who pretended to be black. It's a it's a bit more complicated than that. She considers herself transracial. It's a big deal. She was canceled when people found out that she wasn't a light-skinned black woman, she was a white woman. So they watched the documentary, and then after they watched the documentary, I show them a statement, a personalized statement from Rachel herself to them, right? So that also makes it exciting. They want to listen, they want to try to understand, they're focused because this was for them. So I have, like I said, I have so many different people that I have interviewed and that have given me statements. This here is Core Skeet. My students also watched the HBO The Rehearsal. I show them the first episode of The Rehearsal. And Core Skeet also, I booked him on Cameo to give a statement to my students. And his statement was quite long because usually these statements are like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. His was like 8 minutes. It was a long statement for the purposes of this because usually cameos are really short. So I asked him to talk about the importance of education. And this was a whole discussion with the students. Everybody was, well, you have to, I don't want to spoil it for you, but check out The Rehearsal, the first season. This guy's in the first episode. I want to go over the list of people that I have interviewed. And by the way, all of this is available to you all if you want to use the interviews. You're more than welcome to. So, when I interviewed America's Next Top Model Jocelyn Pennywell, at the time it was 2021, and at the time, was it 2021? I believe it was. The whole Kyle Rittenhouse thing was going on. And yes, it was November 2021. And she talked about not only the politics and what was happening at the time, but she also addressed the racial tensions and everything that was happening, the riots that were triggered by the Kyle Rittenhouse situation. He was a young man that he was acquitted for self-defense, but he went to trial for shooting someone in the middle of a riot. And he was a white man, and he was acquitted. He was acquitted, and this created, I don't even want to get into it right now, but you can imagine. So she talked about this. She didn't talk so much about being on America's Next Top Model, but the fact that she was in America's Next Top Model. And there are clips of this show all over TikTok. So my students knew who she was because of that. And they were interested in hearing what she had to say. What else do I have that I want to show you? Because I want you to watch one of the interviews in its entirety. I had Adrian Dortch. Right now there is a documentary on Netflix called Fit for TV. And it's about the show The Biggest Loser. Adrian Dortch was a contestant. And as a person of color, he talked about racism. He talked about the whole experience of being a person of color in the United States. And of course, the American dream. The American dream is almost like a sub-project within my project. Pollyanna's American Dream, I'm calling it. I am gathering all of my interviewees statements about the American dream in one documentary where I also talk about the American dream. But if Donald Trump is listening to this, I am not trying to go to the United States illegally and live there. That's not it's not that type of American dream. I'm just talking about the American dream for the purposes of American studies. So all of these interviews and the statements, they are on my channel on YouTube. And I'm not a big YouTuber, and I'm not trying to become one by any means. But I want to share what I do, and I want people to be able to also be inspired by these interviews, by these statements, and perhaps they will improve this idea and make it something of their own. I have interviewed TikTokers and YouTubers as well, because my students are a lot more interested in TikTokers than they are in movie stars and celebrities of that caliber. Nowadays, if you're not a TikToker, you're nobody. Anyway, I will be on a Q&A at the end of this, and I'll talk to you live, direct, and in color. Thank you so much. But I'll be seeing you live, direct, and in color. Pun totally intended. They live in color.